Is there anything left after last meeting? Okay, seeing none, I am going to proceed right to the conferees. I'll say it once, so I don't have to say it every time somebody comes up. Thank you all so very, very much for agreeing to come and speak to the committee. We had our interim committee on elections earlier or last year, and if we'd had a third day, this is what the third day would have looked like if I had anything to say about it. Was a chance for the election officers to come talk about the hard work that they do and the hardworking folks that work with them. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Rick Pifo to come up as our first conferee. Welcome to the committee.
That's on now? Okay. My name is Rick Pifo. I'm the Harvey County Clerk and Election Officer. I'm also an officer in the Kansas County Clerks and Election Officials Association, and I'm chair of their Elections Legislative Committee. So I'm testifying on behalf of the association, even though some of the comments will be related to what happens in our county. I appreciate the opportunity for us to come and speak that we didn't have in September. My testimony, I'm not necessarily addressing any of the allegations that were made on during those hearings. Just want to assure you that we have lots of processes, checks and balances, that our elections in Kansas are secure. We do have, I put the word sufficient in my testimony, but I think, I don't know if that's the right word. I think our Kansas election laws are good, very good. I think a lot of other states model theirs after Kansas. I just got back from a conference with a bunch of other national election officials, and we discussed some of the differences and similarities, and there are a lot of differences. There's a lot of similarities. We all get to the same place, but we get there a little differently. Even within Kansas, that's true, because we have very large counties to very small counties. You got Johnson County. I don't know what their numbers are, but in the 400,000 range, and we've got some counties that are less than 1,000 voters. My county, I would consider in the middle, but we're actually in the top 15 to 20 as far as registered voters, and then it drops off, and we have about 24,000 voters, and it drops off really rapidly after that. As far as the LPA, or legislative post-audit part of the hearings, my county was actually one of the counties selected to be audited. I don't just disagree necessarily with their practices, but I think it was a good report. We did see that there's some things that a lot of us were missing, some written policies, but in my mind, we all have statutes and guidelines. Those are our written policies, regardless of whether I write one specific for my county. And a lot of theirs had to do with, it was not necessarily that we weren't doing some of the things that they looked at. It was just that we couldn't provide, some counties couldn't provide sufficient documentation of doing that particular task. And they did follow, as far as their checklist, they went to EAC best practices, which are not, I mean, that's what they're best practices, but they use those as a checklist to say, are you doing this best practice or this best practice? So that part of it, I'm not sure that I agree with their, I mean, they had to find something to use as a checklist, I guess. As you know, elections are very complex and require lots of people and processes. For our association has 109 members. So there's 105 counties. The four largest counties, as you know, have election commissioners, one of which is here today. The rest of us do county clerk and election officer duties. And a lot of those duties actually overlap. If you think about it, we always have an election first Tuesday following first Monday in November. Well, the tax roll is due to the treasurer on November 1. We have an election, normally we have primary elections first part of August. Well, we have R&R statements that have to go out August 1. So we have a lot of other duties besides just elections. Not that that's an excuse for anything. I mean, we all still get the elections done. It's just sometimes some of us, we have some small offices, and sometimes it's hard to get personnel to get everything done, or to have all the extra paperwork that's the LPA was asking for. Most of us are elected, just like you and all of you on this committee. Some of us by even larger jurisdictions than even you guys do. But so we will all of us that are elected will be on the ballot this year. I'm sure you know we do have at least three countywide elections to conduct this year. We're doing the normal primary, the normal general election, plus on top of that in March we're doing a presidential preference primary. As far as I'm concerned, I prepare for all elections the same. We will have there'll be more volume, more voters this year, and there'll be more scrutiny because it's a presidential election, but the preparation and conduct is the same. It's just more volume. We have a long history of conducting free and fair elections. Unlike some other deadlines, they must be conducted on specific dates regardless of any other issues. I mean, we don't have the option to say, oh, I'm not quite ready. Can we do it next week? You know, we have to be ready to get it done. Like I said, there are lots of checks and balances throughout all aspects of the process. You know, for example, on election day or election night, we check the number of voters that have checked in on the poll books compared to the number of ballots cast or tabulated. And if those numbers don't match, then we go and try to find out why, whether it's a voter that checked in and then just didn't actually vote, which would cause you to be a little short or long on check-ins. Or it could be maybe that somebody brought an advance ballot and tried to put it directly into a tabulator, but then you find those. And so it's all about the checks and balances. I mean, on election night, for me, I rarely even look at who's winning or losing, the candidates. It's about making sure everything balances. We do have pre and post testing of election equipment. We also have election audits that prove that the system works. Even there was an issue in Cherokee County a year or so ago. The audit proved that the system worked. I mean, yes, there was an issue, but the audit caught the issue. They counted it correctly. And as far as I know, all the audits have come out exact or virtually exact. We also had, in the August 22 primary election, we had recounted 2 separate races. Some counties were selected for the state treasurer race. Some counties were selected for the value them both amendment. My county actually was selected for both. Lucky me. So we did those. And the results in all the counties that did recounts were either exactly the same or virtually the same, explainable. In my county, the election board, they were off a little bit from the machine results, but they'd already had a long day and were willing to accept the results being off a little bit from what the machine results were. So those are the results we went with, because the election board has that power to decide when they're done. And so we do believe in the integrity of elections are very important to us. I mean, the safety, security, a lot of security features as far as, ballots, equipment, everything else. I will say that, there's been some groups pushing for all hand-counted paper ballots, and we don't trust machines. Well, I can tell you that in Harvey County, I don't even have to poll the voters because we give all voters the opportunity to vote either. When they check in, we ask them, do you want to vote a paper ballot, hand-marked paper ballot, or do you want to vote on a ballot marking device? In our case, the ballots on the ballot marking device, when they're ultimately print out, they look exactly like the ballot I would hand you, but the ovals are filled in nice and pretty, and it won't let you overvote. And even with our previous equipment, we have about 50-50 as far as who wants to vote machine, who wants to vote paper ballot by hand. And that's been consistent for a number of years. Even before I had, or when I still had DREs, with no printout or anything, we still had about 50% of our voters chose to vote on machines. So at least in my county, there is at least half the people trust the machines. I think that's all I have to say for the moment. I'm sure the other conferees will have more to say, and I'll gladly stand for questions when appropriate.
So committee, I probably should have said this up front. I'm going to go ahead and have each conferee take questions, because otherwise we'll be doing the musical chairs at the end with like people coming up, and it'll take more time. So are there any questions for Mr. Pifo before I badger him? First, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Mr. Pifo. Does the KCC EOA, you guys do have a legislative agenda for this year?
Correct.
And are there copies of it out someplace? Or?
I meant to bring some with me. We actually are having a legislative reception next Tuesday night.
Okay.
And your local county clerk should be emailing you an invite, but I will send an invite directly to all of you when I get back to the office.
Also, if I can follow up.
Sure. The invite will include the legislative platform.
Okay. The question, I know there's legislation being looked at. I'm kind of getting curious if you have a sensibility about it. I mean, the notion of making sure not just, I know when you guys do a recount, that's inevitably by the literal paper ballots. Audits were not necessarily that way, but as far as the notion of doing like the mandatory audits, with the literal paper ballots, that as far as for Harvey County or for the KCC EOA, do you have any particular comments on that? I'm curious about that.
I will say in my county, I recently, just in 2022, replaced my election equipment. Prior to that, I was using the actual hard ballots, sorting them out by precinct. Once the precinct was selected or ballot style was selected, then the board would use the actual ballots. But it is in the regulation to allow for ballot images, and my new system allowed me to just sort those images. So in the last few elections, we have been using images. It does go much faster because, like I said, there's the sorting process of, we have normally we have 43 ballot styles. My county is fairly small. We have 43 ballot styles, and in a city school election, we'll have up to like 52. So it's not as big a deal to sort out the paper ballots from election day because they all come in from one polling place, but it's the ones, the advance and the early ballots are all mixed up. So you have to sort those out and make sure that you get them all. Whereas the images, it's easy to say, I want precinct 1, race number, whatever, and then I bring it up on a big screen so that they can see it. They go through, and we count them the same. It's just they're using the image. But I think we're going to switch back to using image or actual ballots.
Any other questions for Mr. Pifo? Representative Oropeza.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Pifo. My question would be, when you use the images, is there ever an opportunity to print those images if need be?
We could print them. I could sort them in the system and then print those particular ballots. would still be an image, it'd be a hard copy of the image, but
Okay, thank you.
that's just my system.
Mr. Ranking,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rick, one, sorry for being late, committee. I was coming from a meeting with the folks at Legislative Post Audit, so I don't want to like put you on the spot, but I would be interested if there is, I think we heard a lot at the interim committee about some of the inconsistencies for different practices in the different counties. So not to propose anything just yet or put you on the spot, but would be interested if the county election officials and county clerks would have any sort of minimum security standards that you would all be interested in proposing or working with the Secretary of State. I know that there's a bill to do rules and regs for ballot drop boxes, and so if there's any sort of appetite for putting, I know what works in Johnson's not going to be the best case for some of the smaller counties, but if there is any sort of minimum security standard that you all would recommend, I would definitely be interested in hearing that.
As far as like the drop boxes, we actually supported the bill last year that would allow the Secretary of State and us to create rules and regs for drop boxes. But as far as other things, some of the chain of custody documents, some of those kind of things, I mean, it's a little easier for larger counties that have much more staff to do more paperwork. I'm not saying that it's not important to have, make sure that those ballots are secure, but it's tougher when you have a smaller staff to always have, multiple people from multiple parties.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the biggest thing for me that stood out was the number of instances where there were not two people of different political parties or unaffiliated voters throughout the state. Many of those, I'm a proud Democrat, and I know it's tough in some of the rural counties to find another Democrat, but definitely want to make sure we're looking to a Libertarian or an unaffiliated as well as a Republican. So if there's anything like that we could work on, be happy to hear it.
That is a difficult one to, as you know, Kansas is majority Republican. A lot of our offices only have Republicans, so it's a little, and I don't really like to ask even my staff what your political affiliation is because we conduct elections nonpartisan, so I don't really care what party they're with. But now I'd have to know so that, okay, it can't be two of us, ours, I got to go find a D, whether it be out of the treasurer's office or wherever, so it is tough. Maybe not as tough in my counties as it is in some of the western Kansas. Some of those only have two people on their staff, period. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We are sworn elected officials, I guess. So.
any other questions for Mr. Pifo? Okay, I got a couple. Just a couple, I promise, because I don't want to go over time here. So how often after Election Day are you getting ballots that are not postmarked?
We get a few. Our post office is really pretty good. We get a few, but if they're not postmarked and they're received after Election Day, we can't prove that they were submitted before 7 p.m., so therefore they're not counted.
Yeah, and that's my concern. That voter didn't do anything wrong, and
Right.
we can't count it because it came without a postmark. So I just, for people that might be watching this later who didn't watch the elections hearing, I said this to the LPA folks. They're hardworking folks, and I understand why the decision was made, and it wasn't actually all their decision, but I understand why the decision was made to not do the audit during an election, but it created that problem that if you don't have it written down that you do something, I have to say you don't do it. Do you think it is practical to have the Secretary of State's office do a kind of, I don't know, templated policies for clerks that they can adjust? Or do you think that the clerks, the different election offices are just so different that that's impractical?
No, I would like to, I mean, whether it comes from the Secretary of State's office or from our association, we definitely want to have more templates available to everybody to say, okay, here's a policy, a template policy, revise it as you need for your county. Because there's a lot of other things. We share a lot of information amongst each other. And when somebody has a really good practice or form or something, then we share it with everybody else. And I see the same thing happening. It's just a lot of these, like I said, even though they were in best practices, there were very few counties that actually had some of these written policies. But I think we're, from the audit, I think our plan is to work on that more.
All right, last call for questions. Any questions for Mr. Pifo? Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
I'll be here if you got more questions.
All right, I'm sure we will, and we'll see you at the reception. Next, I'd like to ask Mr. Jameson Shue to come forward from the Douglas County Clerk's Office, the Douglas County Clerk, actually.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually go by Jamie. Jameson's my formal name. But so my name is Jamie Shue. I'm the county clerk of Douglas County. I have served in that role since 2005. And so I guess over the years, I've become one of the old guys in the state running elections. In my testimony, I kind of looked at a couple of things. One of them that I wanted to talk about was resources. I think what you saw on the LPA audit was really a discrepancy in resources with smaller counties and larger counties. I think the larger counties did better with that audit. And part of that is we have a lot of the resources where we can do a lot of those EAC best practices. So I talk about a couple examples of that. So we actually were lucky last year to win a number of national awards because we developed a program using RFID technology to track all of our equipment. RFID technology, when you go to like a Best Buy, and if you were to try to steal something and go through a sensor, it'll go off because it has little tags on it. We developed a program where we use those tags to track, monitor everything that leaves our warehouse, but also to basically give us alarms if something leaves our warehouse. We were the first in the country to do that. It took us 4 years to do. Our initial investment was $20,000 to do it. It cost us $5,000 a year to keep it going. We are the only county in Kansas to use something called ballot tracking, which is we put intelligent mail barcodes on all of our ballots, and our voters can watch ballots as they go through the mail system. Each time it goes through the mail system, they get notification, when it's in their mailbox, they get notification it's in your mailbox. They get notification back from us once we receive it, whether it was accepted or rejected. That system costs us between $8,000 to $10,000 to do a year. To me, it's a worthy investment. Our voters love it. It gives them that ability to kind of look at their ballots in the mail stream. It allows me to see what's happening. So as you now know, none of the stuff gets processed in our cities. They go to processing centers. So I can see that it is stuck in Kansas City. So I can call and say, why are my ballots sitting in Kansas City, right? We're able to look at, just an interesting side note, days of service. So from the moment that somebody mails it in Lawrence to when it comes to my office, the average days of service is 6 to 8 days from the moment it's mailed in Lawrence and we receive it in our office. If you're in the county, it's 8 to 10 days. We have key card access, cameras, we have secure doors. All of those things cost us about $1,200 a month just for maintenance and monitoring. I bring these up because those are ways that we're really secure. We're very proud of them. But my county commissioners have been really receptive to keep increasing my budget to pay for those things. We've almost doubled our elections budget. I'm really lucky that our county commissioners have done that, but I know there are many counties that do not have that access. And so when you talk about many of these type of things, please understand for some counties that is a funding issue. We use a lot of checks and balances. We do what's called a basically daily batching process for everything. Advance applications, advance ballots, everything that comes into our office. We check the signatures, we process them, and at the end of the day, they get batched into a group. So let's say 500 ballots or 500 applications. The next day, we bring in a bipartisan board, and they physically check those against the report that comes out of the voter system. And so they verify there's 500 and there's 500 before it goes any farther. For all the ballots that come back, they stay in that batching system all the way until the moment that they follow the retention schedule and they are destroyed. So that 500 stays like that because we are constantly checking ourselves. When it goes in the tab room, we run it as that day's batch so that we know 500 were received, 500 were audited, 500 were counted, 500 were sealed, right? And because of that, 47,657 is a number I talk about a lot. In August of 2022, we were selected to do a full hand recount of the abortion vote. We had reported 47,657 ballots at our canvass, and we hand counted after 3 days 47,657 ballots. We weren't long one, we weren't short one. And in that hand count process, because of the error rate in hand counting, what we did was we had one board hand count each batch, a second board hand counted that batch, and if there was a discrepancy, it went to a third board that counted that batch to make sure that it was correct. So those are just kind of, I wanted to touch on kind of resources and checks and balances and so forth. The last thing I want to mention, Chairman Proctor came to our office and spent a couple hours. We had a really great meeting where we were able to show our processes. I really recommend, as members of the Elections Committee, go visit your local election offices, talk to your election officer, see how you do things. I think it was a really great dialogue that we had, and I really recommend that because there are some really hardworking election officials, office people, poll workers out there that are working every day to do these processes to make sure we have secure elections. So I'm open for questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Hsu? Representative Dodson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Hsu. We've had this discussion on postmark.
Right.
And in your opinion, I mean, we'd have to change some things, but does this RFI tracking device, would that suffice to guarantee us that something had been mailed at the date appropriate?
Well, that's for equipment. So it's on like our tabulators, when we take them out to the polling places, all of our secure equipment, that's what that's for. It doesn't do the postmark
I
part.
misunderstood. I thought you're tracking the ballot when it came through.
So the ballot tracking is a whole other system we have, so we can see it. We would be able to see that it was maybe received in Lawrence by a certain date, but under the current law, I wouldn't be able to accept that. It has to be on that ballot, so there has to be a stamp. Our post office is pretty good at making sure that stamp happens. I will say that there are a few that get through that don't. But I will tell you, I mean, a concern of mine has been, like, when we've received on the Wednesday, I don't know if you've heard, there's no mail on Tuesday, right? When we received that big batch on Wednesday after the election, most of those were mailed at least a week before. So it's taken it a week to get from Lawrence. But yeah, and I'm in support of, there needs to be something on that we can definitively say it was in the drop box, yeah, it was in the mail at the right time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions for Mr. Hsu? I think, I'm sorry, I apologize. Representative Howell, I forgot all about you down there. I've got a
Okay, I
lane
know
of
I'm
it.
hiding. It's short people problems. I'm really good at hiding. Two things. One, just for my education, could you tell me roughly what's your population of your county?
Our voter population is about 85,000.
Okay, and what's your actual population?
It's about 118,000.
Okay, all right. And then on your ballot tracking, I have talked to a postmaster in my district, and he told me that sometimes mail is actually essentially vaporized by their machines sometimes, enough that they can't even identify what that is, you know, what it was when it went in the machine. And and of course, I have no idea of how often that happens. So I'm just wondering, have you actually had ballots disappear that you were tracking?
Well, first of all, we will get voter registrations where it's like, the post office will send us what pieces are left. And so we've received a plastic bag that has like this much of a piece of paper. It was clear as a voter registration. And I mean, I know that they say it was delivered, but we can't do anything with it. What it allows us to do is every now and then, it'll say it's in somebody's mailbox, and they'll say it's not in our mailbox. And a lot of people have the big, like, there's multiple. So we're able to then track down that maybe it was put in the wrong mailbox. As far as disappearing, not really, because of the IMB code. What we have seen is that it's got delivered to the wrong place. So the really good thing about our system, and so for example, I had 4 ballots a few years ago that showed up in Puerto Rico. So I have a huge map where I can watch the ballots move around. It's really cool. And I saw 4 of them in Puerto Rico, and they all had addresses, Baldwin City, Eudora, and 2 in Lawrence. So it was clear they weren't supposed to go to Puerto Rico. So the first thing is I was able to call the post office. They had no explanation why they were there. Then we were able to call the voters and say, we're going to help you get a replacement ballot because your ballot is not going to arrive. It's in Puerto Rico. Post office never really explained why. Without that tracking system, the voter would have called us and said, I never received my ballot, and we would not know why. So that's why I like the system we've got, because it does sometimes go to the wrong place.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very good information, but I realized there was more, I had more questions, of course, sorry.
Oh.
So when you're tracking the ballot, you're tracking the actual ballot when you mail it to the voter.
Right.
Then are you tracking it on the way from the
Yes.
voter back to you?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a thing called an intelligent mail barcode that we can build, and then we tie it to the voter record through Elvis. So we see it the whole time it's in the mail stream, both going and coming back. Every time it touches a post office, then we see it.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your testimony is very, very fascinating. I do want to ask, because, I'm from the city of Hutchinson. Of course, our mail goes to Wichita and comes back to us. I mail stuff, like birthday cards, whatever, to people, and I hardly have 2 days is very standard, 2 days, 3 days. I'm just a little stunned that you said literally from Lawrence, it goes to Kansas City, I presume, and then back. Right. But it takes, honest to gosh, you have a lot of data points that it really is like a 6 to 8 day process.
Yes, I am also stunned. When we first did this system and we got days of service, so that's the average, so some are shorter and some are longer. And I've asked the post office, I've been like, do you have an explanation why? And they're like, we're no longer guaranteeing that it can take 3 days or so. They keep extending the guaranteeing number. I will say that in bigger elections, like a presidential, ballots move faster because I think they're really in tune to that. But I will say, like in local elections, they're not as diligent in making sure our ballots kind of move. Yes, I also am like you. The first few times I saw it, I thought this can't be right.
If I may, I'm also very fascinated by what you were able to do with your, tracking the mail-in ballots. And as far as, do you think, on a practical level, it costs you guys about, what, $8,000 to $10,000 a year, I believe. And I could see, given the fact just that mail-in ballots have a certain sort of, onus to them at this point, that the ability to do that on a bigger level, as far as like statewide or whatever, might make some sense. And I'm just, from your standpoint, it has been just what, voter satisfaction. People are really happy to be able to track this, like you're tracking a UPS package or something. Is that kind of the upside of it?
Yeah, I think the voters have loved that they're seeing it. So they know it's moving. They know that we've received it. And so that's provided a lot of confidence. For us, the Puerto Rico is a great example. I was able to see it and correct it instead of saying to the voter, sorry, we don't know what happened. For us, it's also efficiency, because I can see what's going to hit our office the next day. So if it says that 1,000 are coming the next day, I know to bring in more staff. Or if it says I'm only getting 50 that day, I know not to bring in more temporary staff. So it's been an efficiency thing for us also.
One final question. Given the fact of the kind of horrendous mail time from Douglas County, I mean, do you have, like, your office, advises voters, do not do mail-in votes unless you're going to send it, like, way ahead? Or, because, I mean, clearly people are turning in votes thinking it's going to get there in 3 days, and it doesn't, and then...
Yes, we've been doing a lot of messaging, and including saying, once you get this, vote it and get it back. Do not wait. Do not send it on Friday before the election. So we've been doing a lot of messaging to try to get people to know, if you're, especially the people that asked for it that last, deadline the week before, we're like, as soon as you get that, you've got to walk it into a polling place if you can. I probably wouldn't mail it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So on this, this duration of mail question, right now in Kansas statute, a voter can ask you for a mail-in ballot up to the week before the election. Are we lying to Kansas voters?
Well, first of all, that change was made a few years ago, which we're thankful for, because it used to be the Friday before the election. We're seeing a number of states that are changing that deadline even farther out because of that reason. And so I know that that's something that, we're grateful for the week. We have been seeing states that have been changing that deadline. And that is kind of a voter education thing to make them understand you can't wait till the last minute to ask for it because of that. And we're very clear when people are sending, on that last day, we'll say to them, by the way, especially if we've received it by email or something, we're not guaranteeing you're going to get it, but if you get it, you're going to have to personally get it back to us.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Hsu? Mr. Vice Chairman.
Just kind of follow up. I mean, you guys do have early voting, like where people can come in and vote. I mean, do you direct people, like say, hey, why don't you just come down here and just vote and just, not mess with the mail? I mean.
Yeah. I mean, for some people, getting out can be difficult. We see a lot of our advance mail are older citizens who don't qualify for the permanent advance application for a medical reason. And so, yes, we'll say that, especially in big elections, we'll have like satellite voting and so forth. And I think that's the beauty of the Kansas system is you can kind of choose between in-person advance, mail advance, or polling place. We're not forcing you to do one way or another.
This brings another thing. I mean, I'm a KU graduate, been there in Douglas County. I'm curious. Oh, sorry. But the question about ballot harvesting, I mean, I know you have a lot of activist groups in Douglas County, and I'm just kind of curious, have you had issues as far as, of course, I think the bill or the law, I think is in court. I think it's in limbo maybe. But as far as how common are people, like bringing in lots of ballots as far as like somebody, who's harvesting as it would be, ballots that are not their own. I mean, is that a noticeable, you notice that?
Yeah, we haven't seen that, especially with the bill in place. But even before that, often it was, 5, 8, there wasn't, what you may hear where people walking within stacks. And if somebody was walking with stacks, we'd probably be like, hey, we kind of would like to talk to you. But it was usually more of just a handful. So that's why I didn't really see a huge difference, I think, in that when that law passed in kind of the amounts we were seeing.
Representative Berquist.
Just back to the ballots that came in that were obviously from a week before. Those ballots that came the next day, that many of them were that week before. How many ballots would you say come in like that?
The big elections, it's in the hundreds.
Okay. Thank you.
So auditing of paper ballots.
Yes.
Do you audit paper ballots? And if so, How do you manage to do that, being the fifth largest county in the state?
We do a process where we precinct after we batch. So when we're done with the batch for that day, the audit board that comes in the next day after they've audited everything, we have these big sorters, and we put everything in precinct order before it gets sealed and taken to the tab room. So it's run in the tab room in precinct order, so that then for the audit, we can go into that bag and know there's 10 from this and that. So it takes some time, but we just bring in some extra people, they're poll workers, and they spend a few hours precincting.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Shu? Mr. Vice Chairman.
Sorry to be going back and forth. So I did actually have the question come up to me about Douglas County. Does Douglas County have a different standard as far as on allowing people to vote in local elections, as far as I'm going to say citizenship, but as far as, I mean, do you guys have a different standard as far as who can vote that somehow applies to your local elections? Is that something in Douglas County?
No,
I mean,
no, we follow state law.
okay. No, I had somebody pitching me otherwise, and I wanted to ask you, so.
I know there's local jurisdictions in other states that have talked about it, but that's never been anything for us.
That's great that we've got that on the record now, so thank you. So that honestly, that's why I'm doing this. I want people to hear from y'all and hear what's actually happening, not theories about what's happening. So last thing I'm going to badger you with, you talked about your process for the hand recount. You said you had one group do it and another group do it, and then if they didn't match, then you had a third group do it. How frequently did that happen?
You know, I wish I'd done the stats on that. It was a little crazy time. We were tired. I would say probably about 10%. So, I mean, if you've ever watched anybody do a hand count, especially on the second and third day, and it was always by one, right? And the third one would find, you know, they'd be like, well, we matched that group. You know, as people got tired, probably about 10% is what I would say.
So if we were to do what some people advocate, which is go to a hand count of every ballot, we could expect probably 10% error rate.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Shu? Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for letting me waste your whole day down in your office. It was very, very valuable. Next, I'd like to call up Commissioner Howe from Shawnee County, the Shawnee County Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members. Appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. My name is Andrew Howell. I'm the Shawnee County Election Commissioner. The mission of our office is to honestly and fairly and according to law administer elections for all voters and to accurately report the results in a timely manner. Appreciate the chance to visit with you today, just briefly. First of all, I'd like to say our office has multiple processes and procedures in place to ensure the accuracy of our voter registration rolls. We follow the practices that are legally required by the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, which is the NVRA. Such as our mass mailings, national change of address program, biennial purges, felony and death checks. As an internal practice, we additionally read the daily obituaries, check for duplicate registrations, and verify the accuracy of addresses and the precincts of registered voters. So just to talk briefly about our electronic poll books, I know there were some questions about that. We not only have electronic poll books, but as a backup, we also print paper poll books for every precinct when we have an election. They accurately reflect the current voter roll for that election. For each voter that checks in, we also have a verifiable paper ticket that prints out, and we use that to make sure that our election workers are handing out the correct ballot. And additionally, it has the name, the address, the precinct, and the ballot style that was handed out. So we are not left, when we use those electronic poll books, we're not left without an additional paper record. It's actually, I would call it a redundancy that I think makes sense. Our processes require workers during both early voting and election day to verify that the check-in numbers from the poll book balance with the number of votes or the number of ballots that were cast each hour. So we have a lot of accounting procedures and processes that we use additionally to make sure that there are not additional names being added or changed. Every voter in Shawnee County receives a paper ballot that is auditable, provable, and cannot be changed. Once a ballot has been cast and tabulated, it is dropped through the process of the machines themselves into the locked and secured ballot box. The ballot box is required to remain locked and sealed until possibly opened at a later date by a duly appointed audit board as part of the audit process, which requires the use of actual paper ballots. We also verify and balance the daily count of our early voting, mail, and polling place ballots, both voted and unvoted, so that there is a detailed and accurate accounting for every ballot, whether voted or not, every day. Additionally, current law also requires a ballot transfer affidavit. We may have taken this to the extreme, but we literally have a signed document that when we receive ballots from our printer, we start that entire affidavit process, and that goes clear through the entire process as it moves throughout our building and through the different types of voting options. And we have two people of us opposite parties that sign those documents as that movement occurs. And finally, no part of the final results process touches the internet or is online until we have verified it with a hard copy original result that's printed out internally and verified. We verify the result tapes from each machine that is used in that election and also verify that that ballot count matches what we expect to see on that final report. So we have a lot of, I guess what I'm trying to demonstrate here with this communication is there are a lot of additional things that you probably don't hear about that a lot of offices do to verify that we are seeing the numbers that we expect to see as the voters and the ballots themselves move throughout our processes. So be happy to stand for any questions.
Oh, you surprised me. Okay. First of all, before we go questions, I'd like to thank you as well for throwing open your doors and inviting the committee to come see your operation. I got a ton out of it, just like I did every visit to every election office I've had the opportunity to do, so thank you. Are there any questions for Commissioner Howell? Representative Berquist.
Not a question, but a thank you as well for the tour that we got from you and your staff to see it and touch it and to work with it in person makes us be able to communicate it back to our constituents better. It doesn't mean that everything you did is exactly what everybody else is doing, but that the process is intentionally accurate to the best you can do. And I think that it's exemplified by the testimony of others in other counties and other jurisdictions. So thank you for your time.
You know, and we're happy at any time if anyone in the committee or anyone else, we do tours all the time. We're happy to do that. We think it is an important part of giving the public confidence in how things are done. So like I said, in some ways it's easier to communicate about those processes on site because you can dig a little deeper and spend a little more time. So we're happy to do that if you ever decide you need that for any reason.
Any other questions for Mr. Howell? Representative Dodson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. One of the questions I forgot to ask during the visit down there was that the original facility you had, or is this something that you've moved into later or modified?
No, that actually, I became election commissioner in 2012, and we moved into that building in 2015. The county spent quite a bit of money modifying the building and doing a pretty deep study into you know, the needs, the processes, the space. And again, it's not perfect, but it works pretty well, all things considered, and they spent a great deal of time in that.
That was one of the takeaways I had, kind of how the ballots move through the process and then were stored. And I know Rich Vargo down in Riley County, we just got them a little bit of money to make some changes in that facility to take care of some of the things that were really made the process a little bit dicey. You know, if you don't have room and you don't have separate kind of rooms to move things to, then it makes it a little tough for the clerk.
You're correct. I know the original facility that we had, very, very difficult to charge the machines. Sometimes it was difficult. We actually had people voting in 4 separate rooms, and we would have to move 3 people into one room, 3 people into another. It was difficult.
Yeah.
So it can make a big difference in efficiencies, as well as I think just the overall confidence of the public that they've got a functioning facility. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Halsey, how long are ballots are required to be kept? I mean, like the ballots from the 2022 election, 2020, I don't know. How many years do you physically hold on to the actual paper ballot?
the law requires in even years that we keep it for 22 months, and then there are some, I believe, the envelopes for 24 months. So that's what we do. We've actually got a system in our office, and I think we may have showed you some of that, where we've got labels that we apply to the boxes from each of the precincts, so we can literally go back to every precinct and every location and every type of ballot and find that for those 22 months, I guess, for an even year, and 6 months for odd year elections, for the local elections.
And if I may, you said you had been the election commissioner since what, 2005 or 2012? 2012, okay. Over the last 10 plus years, Kansas actually has changed its election laws a fair amount, I would think. Would you say, from just your professional opinion, I mean, does it seem like that we have taken some good steps in the right direction as far as election security and such? I mean, what's, then versus now, or now versus then, what do you see?
I think that the legislature has taken some good steps toward additional security. I think the audits are smart. I think they are really probably one of the key ways to prove that the actual paper ballots aren't changed and are counted correctly. So I think most of what I've seen makes a lot of sense from a security perspective.
And one final question. I have had people pitch me on the thing about that somehow, even though the machines aren't connected to the internet in any way, that somehow by some secret method that they can be manipulated. Do you have any sort of, I don't know, you deal with the equipment, I don't know, what would be your commentary to that question?
It's been my experience that the ES&S equipment that we have, I have never yet seen in any audit or any post-test or any pre-test or any of the testing or any of the experiences that I've had that it's missed anything. I find them to be very accurate and very consistent year after year after year. So that's just been my personal and professional opinion on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just add, in the off-season, one of the other things I did was NCSL invited legislators involved with elections to a conference in Austin, and they actually took us to one of the factories, not the factory that not a factory that supplies Kansas, but they have a lot of the same similar challenges. And the security of that building, I was in the Army 25 years. I had a top secret compartmented information clearance, and that was the most secure building I've ever been in. It was unbelievable. And the control measures for people going in and out, and they talked about some of the things to get EAC certification. They got to take the machine and put it in a room for 2 weeks to make sure it won't communicate to the internet. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I'm sorry for that soliloquy. Any other questions for Commissioner Howell? So you're one of the 4 biggest counties in the state, which is why you're a commissioner, not an elected clerk. Do you audit paper ballots or ballot images?
We are auditing paper ballots.
Okay, so how are you managing to do that with so many ballots?
It does take some extra time, and I think what I initially worried about was making sure that we didn't somehow, mess up our precinct level ballot counts. But we just take the time. We're extra careful. We have 2 or 3 people verify that we know where they're at, what the counts are, and keep them separated into their own individual subset. So it's tough. There's a lot to manage, but we are managing to do it, and I think it's important for confidence to do that.
Another question, and I've talked to so many election officers, I can't remember which person told me this, but several people told me this. I can't remember which several people told me this, but doing early voting until Monday at noon, does it make it difficult to reset all those poll books in time for for Election Day?
I think for us, we've got to where we can manage it. It is tight, and if anything goes wrong, or if there's an interruption in the internet service, or if there's, you know, if we're short on staff, it can make it very difficult. And I have in the past, early on, we did have some difficult times trying to get caught up to our judges and getting them the equipment and ballots. So it can be challenging. We're managing so far, but it can be a challenge.
Not asking you a policy question, but it would make your life easier if we didn't do that additional 4 hours on Monday from 8 to 12 or whatever.
It would take some of the pressure off. That's I mean, as you're getting ready for election the next day, there are plenty of other things to be doing as well. So yes.
Any other questions for Commissioner Howell? Okay, I think, oh, wait, you were almost there. Representative Hoagland.
Would you anticipate a 10% error ratio on the hand count?
I don't know if my experience is quite that high, but as people get tired and as they're doing long, lengthy procedures, I think it depends a little bit on exactly what they're looking through, but it is significant. I don't want to say that it's not. It is. As we get older and as we get tireder, I think it is significant. I think it's important to have. I think it's an important process, but I do think there is an error rate that is a part of that.
And I'd just add, that was the value in them both question was just one question. Imagine if they had to hand count every single race on the front and the back of the ballot. I bet the error rate would go way up. I don't have any data to prove that, but having watched a recount, yeah. Any other questions for Commissioner Howell? Okay. Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate you coming today. Thank you. All right, our final conferee, unless anybody else is out there that I've missed who wants to speak, is Abby Amick, the clerk for Wabaunsee County. Welcome to the committee, and thank you as well for taking a day to walk me around your operation.
Yeah, thank you for coming. I sure appreciated having the opportunity to show you around our historic courthouse and our pretty humble office space. So I'm here, as he said, I'm Abby Amick, the Wabaunsee County Clerk. I'm finishing up my first term as clerk, so I was elected in 2020 and have administered the elections in Wabaunsee County the last 3 years. So this will be my first presidential primary. I'm getting a lot of great advice from my colleagues across the state and appreciate their experience and expertise as I work through all of the fun challenges that elections present. I'll echo a lot of what they said. So as far as written policies or the way that each county operates, we and the way that I learned was through statutes and the election standards book. So that is my policy. I wouldn't write it differently. I just follow what is prescribed to us in the laws. For perspective, Wabaunsee County is 6,800 people, so smaller than some of their precincts. We're 800 square miles, so we do have 7 polling places across the county that we set up on Monday, while I also have voters coming into my office to vote until noon that day. I personally do all of our equipment programming, all of our ballot programming, and we do on-site printing. So I don't have anything outsourced. I do it all personally in my office. And then I guess to that same point, we have 17 machines for the whole county. I only have 17 machines to keep track of. An RFID system feels almost ridiculous for that because I can personally tell you where each machine is at all times. They're locked in the vault behind my desk. There's no reason to question who's accessing those machines or where they're at because they can't leave without walking right past me. We do, for voters, in comparison to our population, we have 5,229 voters as of today, active voters. And then I mentioned the 7 polling places. I have 3 staff in my office. So in addition to elections, we do all the other duties assigned to clerks through the statutes. And so between the 3 of us, we manage Elections are the tax side of things, accounts payable, payroll, and public transportation, which we just volunteered for that one. It's not in statute. We operated this past election with 32 poll workers. I guess I should have pointed out that with our 5,000 voters, we're number 45 in the state. So we're pretty middle of the road. I know Harvey County feels like they're fairly medium-sized, but we're right at the middle. So that means there's a lot of counties, 45 other counties that have fewer voters than I do. So my point with all of that is that we can't all operate under the same, or there's not a blanket policy, I guess, that each of us could perform equally. Each election official is designated with that responsibility to conduct those elections in their county. I feel like they know their constituents and their abilities better than anybody else, and they should be given the authority to make those calls. You talked a little bit about, maybe I should wait and see if you ask me, but you talked about ballots that come in, missing postmarks, or just ballots in general that come in after Election Day. So again, our numbers are very different from the bigger counties. In 2020, I had just under 4,000 people vote total at the general election. 65 of those ended up being provisional. 600 of those were advanced in person, and 900 of those were advanced by mail. Our office had never seen more than 150 advanced by mail in a single election before. So 2020 obviously is not your standard year, but that was where we learned, or my staff learned. I wasn't in office yet, but that's how we had to come up with procedures for dealing with large numbers of ballots. On an average day now, we'll get 25 ballots in the mail a day. So batching in groups of 500, we'd never get there. Our total for 2023 advanced by mail was 171 ballots. So we're just, our record keeping and our tracking looks very different from the larger counties, but it's all still incredibly accurate. It's on paper. I did an audit from the Secretary of State's office, and when I turned in my sheets, this is what our tracking looks like. This is where all my people are and where all my equipment are. It's all by hand, but it's accurate. It's all the information's still there, even if it's not a computer system keeping track of it. The annual budget for elections typically in Wabunsee County is under $100,000. So that includes our staff, all of our printing, all of our postage, all of our equipment fees. So the software just to program my own ballots is almost half of that budget. So it's an incredibly expensive operation for a handful of elections a year, but it definitely makes sure that everybody has access to vote and that they can trust that we have accurate and secure elections through our processes. So with that, I think I'll open it for questions.
So are there any questions for Ms. Haming? Representative Hoagland.
So you have seven polling places?
Yes.
In 800 square miles?
Correct.
How far does someone have to travel to vote?
That's a great point. So I have a polling place in every city, incorporated city. So generally, a person, the largest portion of the population is going to be in the city that they're voting in. But I do have people that are traveling 40 minutes to get to a polling place because it's just so rural. They're just so far out to get to a main hub, I guess. We also offer advanced voting in person in our office, so it's in Alma, which is the county seat, and it is central geographically in the county, but it can be up to an hour for somebody to drive to Alma to vote in person advance, and it's not on their way to anywhere. They generally work in Topeka or Emporia or somewhere to the east or south, and so it doesn't make sense for them to turn around and drive west an hour to vote. And so we get, a lot of those folks tend to take advantage of advanced voting by mail. So yeah, they've done a great job of getting themselves to a polling place or getting their ballot by mail. I don't know that I mentioned, well, I didn't take down how many ballots come in after Election Day without a postmark, but I have yet to accept a ballot that arrives after Election Day. So that may be a problem in rural post offices, that we're not getting a postmark on our envelopes. So if I receive a ballot after Election Day, more than likely it's not going to have a postmark on it.
So last year, when we were debating the 3-day grace period, the statistic that we got from the Secretary of State is that 0 ballots came in for rural counties after Election Day. The revised number is 0 were counted because they were coming without postmarks. And that was pretty shocking to me when I started going around and talking to clerks. So I appreciate that. Any other questions for Ms. Amy? Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you again. No, thank you very much for coming. I do wonder, so you just started here in 2020, and I know I'm curious, just given that on a national basis you have a fair amount of people who are very concerned about, convinced that elections are fraudulent and such like that. I mean, do you have that as far as, does that become a problem, or is that a problem at all with you as far as like people somehow thinking, in Waubonsie County it's all rigged or something, or that you guys are just slovenly, naive or something? I mean, I am curious, do you get that feedback?
I appreciate the question. So we do have, I have had a handful of people that come in and they want to turn in their advanced ballot in person or vote. Actually, I've had someone come in to update, get a hunting permit, and I said, oh, advanced voting's open, you want to go ahead and advance? Oh, no, I have to vote on Election Day, I don't believe in all of this. I know there's nothing wrong in Waubonsie County, but other places. So all of the ones that I've heard from, generally, none of them have ever questioned our system in Waubonsie County, and I always assure them that everybody, all of the county clerks and election officers across the state operate under the same system. We're all doing the same thing with the same rules, and have the security and accuracy of elections at top of mind. So being new, I don't know, it's offensive, I guess, that people doubt my colleagues and myself, but.
If I could, I know on a somewhat of a national level, there has been some issues with, being able to hire people being willing to work in elections, because it can be, on occasion, very, fraught with, tension and whatever. I mean, do you have any problems in rural Kansas and Waubonsie County?
We have not seen any kind of hostility toward poll workers or in my office either. We do kind of struggle to find people that are available for the day, and it's not so much available for a portion of the day, it's available from 6 a.m. till whenever they get done that night. So our election workers have worked a very long time. I had a group of 3 retire after 45 years of being poll workers last year. And they knew how things needed to be done in their precinct. They were very efficient, but they had all been doing it a very long time and decided that they were ready to have someone else come in. So we've ramped up kind of our recruitment of poll workers so that we have more that have experience, and we're now offering one split shift at each polling place. So I'll have somebody come in from the 6 to noon and somebody else take over, 6 to 1, and then kind of a noon to whenever it's finished shift. So I don't let the whole polling place turnover, but I'm trying to offer a few more options to get more people getting the experience in a polling place, and then just to make sure we have enough eyes at the polling place. So you're welcome.
Representative Howell.
Thank you, Chair. I was just curious, have you chosen to use ballot boxes at all, or drop boxes?
We are unique in the state, and again, those came out in 2020, and so I inherited them, I'll say, but we have 4 total in our county. So we have one at the courthouse that is the standard courthouse drop box. But then at our three furthest cities, we have one at each city hall. So Maple Hill has one, Harveyville, and then Alta Vista. Each of those are a considerable drive to get to Alma, so they were placed there because we couldn't choose one. You can't just choose one city to put a drop box in when everybody's so far away from the main courthouse. So we do open them on even numbered years, on even numbered years. On odd numbered years, I did not open them for the primary because it's expensive for me to send staff around. It's over a 100-mile round trip to check all of those. And then I'm having to have somebody on the clock that entire time. Well, 2 people. We have 2 people in the vehicle checking all of those. So we do have the drop boxes. The people that use them do appreciate them very much. They're all under camera. All the city halls have a camera outside their door, so they're all being watched that way. And yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions? So I'll follow up on Representative Howe's question. So how often do you get around? I mean, they're so far away, and how often are you able to get around to all the drop boxes and collect ballots?
We, in 22, we did every day. I went ahead and sent somebody every day. For this last general election, we just did it twice a week. So it's just to save money, yeah. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, our process. Yep, we audit paper ballots. So like I said, we have the 17 touchscreen voting machines. They do get heavily used by our constituents, and so those print a paper ballot. So everything's a paper ballot, but we audit on the actual ballots. I don't even know if I have the ability to pull images. Okay. We do, the nice thing about the images that I do get out of our scanner, the machine that actually scans the ballots, is it pulls all the write-ins, and so I don't have to physically view every single ballot to tally write-ins. It will actually pull the image of those write-ins and put them on a sheet sorted by precinct and then by the office that those people were written in for. So it's handy for that, but beyond that, we don't use ballot images.
And then I'll also ask you the question that I asked, I think, Commissioner, continuing to do early voting until Monday at noon, does that create problems for you?
So the poll book is the only thing in the entire polling place that is connected to the internet, and one of the nice things about that is that my office can see how many people have checked in at each polling place throughout the day. So when I do my polling place setup on Monday, I'm connecting just that poll pad to the internet. So it can get live feed from my office saying, oh, John Smith already checked in and advance voted today. You can't let him vote when he comes to the polling place tomorrow. So it's keeping it real-time accurate. Just because of staff, it would be less of a headache for me. But as far as, we're already setting up our polling places on Monday, so it feels like they could probably wait one more day and come in and vote in person, yeah, at their polling place.
Do you think if you were to do early voting at more than just in your office, would you be able to, like, would you be able to be set up in time? I mean,
No,
with the number of people.
Right, yeah, because I actually take staff from other offices in the courthouse to go help me set up. And so I leave one person in my office and one person in the appraiser's office. So those offices are pretty limited for the day. And it takes us, we're not done at 5. It takes us quite a day to set up 7 polling places. But yeah, so the advanced voting, we do get a lot of people. No matter what day your last day is, that's gonna be when you get the most people. Everybody waits till the last minute for a lot of things. And so regardless of what day of the week is the last day, you're gonna get a rush that day.
Any other questions for Ms. Amy? Okay, thank you so much for being here today. I really, really appreciate it. And again, thank you for opening your office to let me learn about how you do business. Thank you. Okay. All right, so committee, that concludes our conferees today. And I'll say again to everybody, thank you very much for taking out your time to come here. I'd like to remind the committee that tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. downstairs, not, I think some people, I said, the way I said it made it sound like it was across the street at Secretary of State's office. I think it's here in this building in the Kansas Historical Society Auditorium. Right outside, right inside the entrance to the Visitor Center. We're going to have vendors for all the different vendors that sell voting machines in the state of Kansas are going to be set up and available to answer any questions you have. So if you can sneak down there between session and everything else going on, I heartily encourage you to do that. I'd like to, just in the interest of transparency and giving everybody plenty of time to prepare, next week, we're going to start hearing bills. The first bill that we're going to hear was just read in today. It's House Bill 2504, which is auditing of paper ballots. So we'll have a robust debate, hopefully, about whether we want to mandate that or not. The other bill I've turned in, but it has not been read in yet. It's RS 2230. It'll get a bill number tomorrow, and I'll let you know as soon as we got a bill number. We'll publish the agenda. But for Thursday, I'm going to try to hear that bill, and that is the is potentially ending early voting on Sunday rather than Monday, or that. Not mandating that they do early voting on Sunday, but the last day that they could, if they choose to do weekend early voting, is Sunday. I will, as soon as we have a bill number for it, we'll publish that as part of the agenda, and it'll go out. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Okay, seeing nothing, thank you very much for your time and attention. We're adjourned.